I want to talk about Israeli wine. 30 years ago, when I was a lot younger, people used to say, "What's Israel to you?" I was living abroad, and I used to think Israel was symbolized by the kibbutz and the Jaffa orange. If you wanted to send a present abroad, you sent a crate of Jaffa oranges, and that was the big Israeli brand. If you ask people what the Israel consists of today, it's high-tech and wine. But you can't give a bottle of high-tech as a present, so I'm going to talk about wine, which really symbolizes, connects the dots with everything about Israel, from our history, from the beginning of the Jewish people, from the Bible, through the agriculture, through the architecture, the gastronomy, industry. Wine we consider is something which really symbolizes Israel through all the ages. Now we have a really ancient history in wine. People talk about the new world of wine and the old world of wine. We come from the ancient world of wine. You can see that vines have been here for at least 5,000 years. Noah planted the first vineyard, and in those days they used to drink a lot more wine than they do today, because wine was considered safe where water was dangerous. So we come from a history which is really the roots of wine growing in the world. As for myself, I made Aliyah about 23 years ago. I came with 3 children with a mission to work in the wine industry. I worked in the wine industry in England, I've really worked for the 2 biggest wineries in Israel, Golan Heights Winery and Carmel, during the day, and by night I've worked very hard to advance brand Israel, which is we see as the important aspect of the wine business. Really, you can sum up the history of Israeli wine with a number of major events. The founding of the modern Israeli wine industry was the 1880s. The quality revolution that everyone talks about happened in the 1980s. In the 1990s, with a touch of Oslo and a bit of peace in the air, we got a boom of boutique wineries. In the 2000s, we've really received international recognition from all the most famous wine critics and wine reviewers around the world. Baron Edmund de Rothschild, he was the founder of Israeli wine. He got involved in the 1880s, and the Rothschild family stayed involved until 1957, when they donated the wineries at Rishon and Zichron Yaakov to Carmel Winery. The Rothschild family were bankers, philanthropists, art collectors, but they also were the most famous wine family in the world. Baron Edmund de Rothschild himself was owner of Chateau Lafite, which is the most famous winery in Bordeaux. And he fell in love with the region. He fell in love with the idea of creating an industry that could work, and put all his energies and all his finance and all his expertise into finding a wine industry. He planted vineyards in the 1880s throughout the country. He built the 2 largest wineries in the 1890s. And he was also founder of a number of cities around villages, farming villages around the country, and he had a number of very good ideas. He insisted on planting Bordeaux varieties, Bordeaux grapes. He really wanted to make a good Israeli wine. That was his vision. He sent, for those of you that know about wine, he sent varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc and Malbec from Bordeaux. And he said, I don't want to make a wine like they make in Bessarabia, in Georgia, and Algeria. Unfortunately, his vision didn't work out, because the growers didn't get the yields they wanted from those quality grape varieties. All the grapes got diseased in the 1890s and had to be replanted. And basically, the demand of the wine drinking public was for Kiddush wine or communion wine for the Christian community, and there was no great designs on quality. But 100 years later, his dream came to fruition. In the 1980s, with Californian expertise, a wine revolution took place. And which varieties did they use? The same Bordeaux varieties that the Baron wanted to plant. Now, as far as the history of Israeli wine, the first modern winery in Israel that's recorded was in 1848, the Shaw family, which still exists today with 3 wineries in Ma'ale Adumim. The 1882 was the founding of Israeli Wine and Carmel. Carmel became the first exporter in 1896 and also Israel's first brand. And for over 100 years, Carmel was Israeli wine. When the Golan Heights Winery was formed in 1983, the quality revolution began, and this consisted also of planting vineyards in high altitude regions. One of the problems we have in Israel is that the temperatures are like North Africa. We think we're Mediterranean, but it's pretty hot in the coast. So if you're going to plant quality wine grapes, you have to climb. High altitude vineyards were planted in the Golan Heights and now in the Upper Galilee, in the Judean Hills, and that's proved critical, as has the technological advances made by the new world of winemaking and the expertise that came in from California. In the 1990s, a boutique wine revolution started. Lots of individuals who either had home domestic wineries started making wine commercially, or people with vineyards started, instead of selling the grapes to other wineries, using their own product, using their own fruit to make their own wines. And suddenly we had hundreds of boutique wineries, domestic wineries, starting all over Israel. This trend started in the 1990s, and we're nowhere near saturation point. Every day there's a new winery being formed. Now the 2 most famous boutique wineries are Margalit, who is a doctor, a home winemaker who decided to make wine, and Castel, one of Israel's best wineries, not far from here, and he started making wine out of a book. The boutique wineries gave Israel color and variety, and every boutique winery has an individual who's making wine with passion and trying to, with character, and trying to reflect something individual of himself or his vineyard in his wines. Vineyards, we have vineyards all over Israel. Israel is covered in vineyards, not quite like Spain, but if you go to drive to the Negev, you'll see vineyards in Mitzpeh Ramon, and if you go to the northern tip of Israel on the border with Lebanon, you'll see vineyards. Israel is growing wines everywhere and using incredible technological advances with the vineyards in the Negev, including using brackish water, including treating sewage water from soldier bases to irrigate the vines. We shouldn't forget when we talk about wine that it's an agricultural product. And Israel in agricultural technology leads the world, and drip feed irrigation is something that Israel gave to the world. If you go to the middle of Russia, you'll see a drip feed irrigation plant. You look at the name on it and it's an Israeli company. So we talk in the industry that we grow the wine, we don't grow grapes. So if you grow the wine, agriculture is probably 90% of the job. What's happened with the vineyards that I talked about, in terms of quality, the Israeli wine industry has moved northwards and eastwards. So it started in the coast, in the Carmel, in Mount Carmel region, in the Shvelat Yehuda, and has moved eastwards towards the Jerusalem Hills and northwards to the Golan Heights and Upper Galilee in the search of quality. The grape varieties, we have all the major grape varieties here. The one thing we lack is indigenous Israeli grape variety, but we do have some unusual grape varieties that grow very well here, which people abroad always want to find, because Cabernet Sauvignon, every country produces Cabernet Sauvignon. There's nothing particularly Israeli about Merlot, but if they can taste an old vine Carignan that's been here a long time, or Petit Syrah, it provides an Israeli twist to what they're looking for. In terms of wineries, the hundreds of wineries, no one really knows how many there are. Commercial wineries, there's 35. Boutique wineries, there's 250. And how many garagistes or domestic wineries there are, we have no idea, but it could be something like 400. The wine regions. The main wine routes of Israel are developed. There's lots of wineries. They're all different. The people who are manning these wineries are trained in different places. The Golan Heights in the Upper Galilee is one wine route. The southern part of Mount Carmel is another. The Judean Hills, the Judean wine route is another. but there's wineries everywhere. You know, you can travel to Eilat and see wineries. What's happened in the 2000s is Israel wine has for the first time started to receive incredible respect. And it's happened suddenly after a lot of work. All the world's major critics are suddenly talking about Israeli wine. These are some of the awards that have happened for the first time to Israeli wineries. And each one, I've been in the wine business a number of years, each one I would be surprised or I would consider it unbelievable that an Israeli winery could achieve that. Now we consider it commonplace. Okay, we're not making better wine than France. We'll never be as good as Italy. But I look at it that we're on a journey. And if you look where we were 20 years ago and where we might be in another 20 years, it's amazing what's been achieved. Third-party recommendations. These are the most famous wine critics in the world. These are people that all the wineries pray that they notice us, and they've all noticed us in the last 10 years or so. Robert Parker, Oz Clarke, Hugh Johnson, and Jancis Robinson. These are people whose views sell wine, sell image, and they're regarded as almost the gods of the wine industry. So to summarize, we have a very dynamic wine industry here. We have an incredible variety of wineries, terroirs, and wine styles. To give you an example of that, in California and France, the harvest takes 2 months because all the grapes mature and ripen at roughly the same time. In Israel, it takes 3.5 months. The harvest can start in July and end in the first week of November. So it shows that we have an enormous variety of microclimates that we're dealing with. The individuals making the wine have incredible passion. It's youth-driven, which I didn't write, very professional, using all the latest technology, and there is a drive for quality. Without doubt, Israel is today making the finest quality and the best variety of kosher wines in the world, but that's dealing to a specific segment. If you're looking regionally, we're part of the Eastern Mediterranean. The Eastern Mediterranean is what gave wine the history and wine culture of the world's wine started in the Eastern Mediterranean. Places like Greece, Cyprus, Turkey, Israel, and Lebanon. And out of these countries, without doubt, Israel's making the best quality wine today. And I believe the wine industry is Israel's finest ambassador because it really does connect all the dots of peoplehood, religion, and place. Wine has a sense of place. You make wine in a particular place, and that becomes the growing region. And in the same way, Bordeaux or Napa Valley is an important place. The place where the wine is made is very important. So to summarize with a sort of slogan, Israel is a new world wine country, new in terms of technology, new in terms of quality, in one of the most ancient wine producing areas in Earth. And that's the paradox, and that's the interest of the world's wine community in our product. Thank you.